Zadover dover acher, zadover miyatu. Meaning it must be done this way. What does it mean? Must be done this way. When the chocham or the bezdin of ordinary Jews, when they annul the neder, they have to use the term haTorah. Mutalach, mutalach, mutar. Mutar. Mutar means permitted. But when a husband nullifies the neder, he uses the term hafora. It's terminated. Hafora. Koloshra Kosov Khan, as the Torah uses the term here, Vimchilfu, and if the Chacham had used the terminology of the husband, Ein Mutter Vein Mufer, the neder is not nullified and it's not undone. So if the husband uses the term Mutter and the Chacham uses the term Mufer, which is Hafora, it doesn't work. What exactly is it all about? In Hebrew, something is permitted is called Muttar. Muttar, it's permitted. Something's forbidden, it's called Assur. What is the meaning of the word Muttar? What's the meaning of the word Assur? Muttar means it's undone, it's untied. It's not restricted. That's the meaning of the word Muttar. Assur means something which is bound. We say Matir Asurim in the morning. We say Hashem frees the shackled, the imprisoned. When you're in prison, you're restricted. You're freed. It's Matir Asurim. He frees the incarcerated. That's Matir Asurim, or the bound. Now, what is the exactly, when you nullify a neder, you go before the Chacham or you go before the Bezdin, what exactly is the process? They ask a question. And this, the whole Mitzvah Nizam speaks about this. You say, if you would have known this and this, would have you made the neder? And the person says, I wouldn't have. Meaning it was a mistake from the very inception. If I would have known that it would have been so difficult, initially I wouldn't have made it. That means initially the neder wouldn't have been made if he was aware of certain things. So the neder, when it's undone from its inception. There's a certain weakness from the time that the neder was expressed. That's the process when the Chacham or the Bezdin, the three ordinary Jews, they nullify the neder. That's HaTorah. They undo it from its inception. When a husband nullifies a neder, he just says, I don't want it. We'll see. The Torah tells us that if a husband becomes aware of the neder, on the day he becomes aware, he has till nightfall. If he says the neder should be nullified, it's nullified. Does not give any reason. He just doesn't want it. So, and when is it nullified? The Gemara has a discussion when a husband nullifies a neder, which is separate. Is it retroactive? Or it's from the time that he nullifies it going forward? What's the halachic difference? If a woman makes a neder and she violates the neder, and the husband's not aware because he's not aware she made the neder, and when he becomes aware, he nullifies the neder. And let's say she was forewarned when she violated the neder initially, she receives malchus. Why? Because when the husband nullifies the neder, it's not retroactive, but rather it's from that moment going forward. Similar, the Gemara compares it to a get. When a man divorces his wife with a get, with a written divorce, the marriage is terminated. So from that moment going forward, she's no longer a married woman. But until she received the get, she's married. Identically, when the husband nullifies the neder, it's not retroactive from the inception of the neder, but rather it's from the moment he hears it, from that moment going forward, the neder no longer is effective. But until that moment, if she violated it, she violated the neder. However, by HaTorah, when a chacham or a panel nullifies a neder, because the neder is retroactive from the inception, if the person had violated the neder, even if he's forewarned, he's not going to get malchus. Why? Because in reality, the neder was never a neder when he violated it, because it's retroactively nullified from the very inception. However, the two ways you're able to nullify a neder when you go before a panel or before a chacham. It's either you made a mistake. What does it mean mistake? If I would have been aware initially that it would have upset someone, or I thought these were the circumstances, and I realized that those were not the circumstances, so that's called a neder that was mistaken to a degree, and because there's a weakness in its inception, if he would have known, he wouldn't have. That's a base. That's called haTorah. You're undoing from the. What about charata? Charata means you're fully aware when you make the neder of all the variables, but you thought you'd be able to deal with it. For instance, a person gets upset with someone and he makes a neder. You will not walk in my house is off limits to you. And he was aware, but he made it because he was angry. Later, he regrets he made it because he realizes he made it in a fit of anger. Nothing changed. He's aware of everything, except he calmed down. Now he wants to undo the neder. That's called charata. That's called regret. So since in either case, it's because he's regretting that he made the neder, or he was unaware initially of certain variables when he made the neder, there the neder is undone from its inception. However, a husband, it's irrelevant. Husband says, I don't want it. But a husband can't nullify any kind of neder. He can, the Torah tells us he can only nullify one of two neders, nedorim, one or two vows. If it's a neder which actually causes her distress, a woman says she's not going to eat, she's not going to bathe, which is called inu nefesh. She's afflicting herself due to that restriction, which came through a vow or an oath, or it's something which interferes with their relationship as a husband and wife. Those are the areas a husband is able to nullify the vow or the oath. But it's regarding other things. Let's say she made a neder regarding one of her friends, that she doesn't want a friend to benefit from her. That neder she has to go to a chacham, as a man has to go to a chacham. To a chacham or to a panel to nullify it. There, the process is retroactive. When the husband does it, which is specific to these two types of nedorim, which causes an affliction or it interferes with the relationship, there the neder is terminated. The moment he hears it, without it, he just says, I don't want it. And it's the day that he becomes aware of it, and it goes, it's terminated from the moment he hears it, going forward, but it's not retroactive. This is important because when we have Hataras Nedorim before Rosh Hashanah, the panel that nullifies the neder has to be aware of the process. That one of two ways the neder could be undone. Either it's called charata, that the person either regrets it, he regrets he ever made it, or haTorah, he wasn't aware of certain variables or facts at the time of the neder. That's the basis for the nullification. But he's not aware of either in terms of the concepts of why you nullify a neder. It doesn't work. Doesn't work. The panel is not qualified to undo the neder. It does not work retroactive. So years ago at Yad Avram, when we would have Hataras before Rosh Hashanah, I would tell the people before we'd sit down to have the panels, nullifying the Dorim, you're able to nullify the neder one of two ways. Either charata, which means regret. You regret that you ever made it because you made it in a fit of anger, and that's why you made it when you were upset, or you weren't aware of all the people you thought you made the neder, and one of the people who you made the neder, who was included in the group, happened to be a person that you wouldn't have restricted. So since the neder is partially weakened, it's faulty, the whole neder is nullified. So the panel has to be aware of these two approaches, how the neder is undone. And if you're not, it's just like you sit and say, it's nullified, it doesn't work. When you say mutarim, mutalach, mutlach, it doesn't work. Ishkido neder, Lashem. A person who makes a neder. Oishava shvula, lesser iser al nafsho. Either he makes a vow, takes a vow, or an oath to prohibit something upon himself. Luyachol dvaro. He cannot desecrate his words. Cannot make his words chumin. He's bound to whatever comes out of his mouth, meaning whatever he articulates in the context of prohibition, he's bound by that. So take a look at Rashi. Lo yichalel dvaro, well, yichalel dvaro, lo yasid dvaro of chulin. Your words should not be treated as ordinary. Chulin means ordinary. It has a sanctity to it, and it has a connotation. Do not desecrate your words. Now, what about a person thinks, let's say you want to consecrate something to the Beis Hamikdash, a korban, a sacrifice. You think in your mind, I want to bring a peace offering, a burnt offering. Are you bound, although you did not verbalize that consecration? When you make a neder or take an oath, a vow or an oath, you have to verbalize it. If you don't verbalize it, regardless of what your thought process is, you're not bound. The provision is not in place. It's called ayotzim piv yaseh. Only what comes out of your mouth. You have to articulate it. You have to verbalize it. What about consecration? You want to commit yourself to give something to the Beis Hamikdash, a korban. So the Gemara tells us, we find by the Mishkan, it says, Nediv Leiv, the one who gave as a result of the generosity of his heart. When it comes to consecration for the Beis Hamikdash, even if you don't verbalize it, you only have the thought process, that's sufficient to bring about that change of status from the ordinary to the consecrated status. When it comes to neder or a shvua or an oath, that you have to verbalize. You need articulation. Now, there's a discussion we find by neder, and also by nozir. It says lindor neder, and it says nozir lahazir. Lahazir nozir. What is this reiteration of this? Samar tells us in the Dorim and in Nozir, if you need verbalization, you have to articulate it. How much do you have to say? Do you have to make a full statement? What about if you make a partial statement, and the partial statement communicates and gives us an understanding of what you mean? For instance, A says Hareini Nozir. Mr. A says Hareini Nozir, so he's a Nozir. B hears it, and he says, and I, or and I also. He did not say the words Nazir, B. But we know exactly what his intent is. There was a degree of verbalization, and he had said something which indicates what his intent is. Is that sufficient to become the Nazir? Or is it enough for him that the vow should be in place? So the Gemara says yad, it's called a yad. It's a handle. Why is it a handle? So the Ran explains that if you have a vessel and you take hold of the handle, when you take hold of the handle, you're actually taking hold of the whole vessel. So when you make a partial statement, if that partial statement indicates your intent, that partial statement is like you said a full statement. That's yad neder neder, and yad nozir nozir. So by the nozir, one says Hareini Nozir, and Mr. B says, and I. Or a person says, loaf A is off limits to me. And person says B should be like A. So if A is off limits as a netter, and he says B should be like A, that's a yad. Even though you didn't say the word nozir, you didn't say neder. Or there are many words which are the equivalent of that. You didn't say it, doesn't make a difference. But since it's clear, there was verbalization, and through that verbalization, we understand your intent, that's sufficient that the net is effective, the Naziris is effective, or the oath is effective. Okay? And that's learned from Lahazir, Nozir Lahazir, and from Lindor Neder. Okay?
Rabbi, I'm sorry to interrupt. Is that applicable when you go back to the thing about when you take a hot item off the fire on Shabbos? I can't remember the circumstances, but that you need to have in mind that you're planning to put it back? Do you need to verbalize that, or it's only enough for it to be in your mind?
No. You see what happens when you go to Ireland. You have a few drinks there, come back, you're a little confused.
Rabbi,
okay.
I don't drink at all, just so you know.
Okay, I'm happy you made a public statement. Now, okay, thank you. I'll give you the keys whenever you want them, as long as it's not on Shabbos. The keys to the car. Okay. Over there, it's a whole different concept. It has no relevance to this. There, the reason why when you take something off the fire, even if it's piping hot, you can't put it back. If you had in mind not to put it back, you had in mind to take it off, leave it on the counter, or put it in the refrigerator. And after you put it down, you say, well, you know something? I'm going to put it back on the fire or on the blech, even on the blech. You're not permitted. Why is you permitted? because putting something which initially is associated with the fire, that's called returning it. But something, if you terminated the relationship with the pot with the fire, it's as if you're putting it on for the first time. If it's for the first time, that's called nirakim mavashel. That's called you're doing an act of cooking, even though it's piping out. This is rabbinical. On Torah level, it's permitted. Rabbinically, you're not permitted. But if you took it off and had it, especially if you're holding the hand, you did not put it down, and you had in mind you're putting it back, that's only you temporarily removed it. It was meant when you took it off to put back. So we never saw a detachment of that pot or that hot item from the stove. But if you took it off, and especially if you put it down, and you had in mind not to put it back, whatever that relationship was, in mind, you terminated that relationship. Now putting it back now, it's like is for the first time you're putting it back, therefore rabbinically not permitted.
The whole point is that's all within your own mind as opposed to needing to. That means my point is that that's all within your own mind as opposed to a need to verbally articulate something.
Has nothing to do with it. It's what you have in your mind.
Okay.
Fully. Okay. So we're speaking now by consecration, one does not need verbalization. For neder or an oath, you have to verbalize it. I would say even a partial statement, as long as it indicates what your intent is, it's like you made a full statement. Now there's a question in halacha, tzedakah, charity. Do we see tzedakah as consecration or not as consecration? For instance, they make an appeal in shul, and whatever the cause is, and in your heart, in your mind, you make a commitment, you're going to give so much money. It's not in your mind, I'm considering. You literally committed yourself to give so much money in your mind. You didn't share it with anyone, you did not verbalize it. Rabbeinu Tam's position is that tzedakah, charity, is like consecration. When you commit yourself to the Beis Hamikdash, the Torah says it's all based on nediv leiv. It's based on what's in your heart. You don't have to verbalize it. So Rabbeinu Tam's position is when it comes to charity, if you commit yourself and you're confirmed in your mind, you're giving it, you're bound to give it. And if you want to undo it, you have to go before a panel to undo it. It's the equivalent, it has to be nullified. And if not, you're in violation of what? Of not fulfilling your obligation of giving the charity. That's Rabbeinu Tam Shita. And very often a person is touched by something. And you for the moment you committed. And afterwards you think to yourself, maybe I was a little too hasty. Or let's say later you find out it wasn't what you thought it was. And you overreacted to it, over-responded to it. So you have to go before a panel and say, look, I want to nullify it. And they nullify it. They'll ask you why. That's the right way to do it. And they say, because I overreacted. If I realized my commitment was too much, I wouldn't have made it. That's a basis. They say, mutalach, mutalach, mutalach. The neder is nullified. He's not bound any longer, like any neder. There's something also very interesting. The Torah says, ish ki do neder. Ish normally means an adult. The action of a minor on the Torah levels is not recognized. A minor is puberty plus years. You have to be 13 for a boy or 12 years for a girl, and they reach puberty. Once you reach that stage of development, your action has value, your words have value, and you're bound, and you have liability. What about before that time? A minor has no liability. What about if a person between the age of 11 and 12, a girl between 11 and 12, or a boy between 12 and 13 makes a neder? The child is not bound. Child is no. But if the child makes a neder between 12 and 13 and says, my domain is off limits to a certain person, that person is not permitted to benefit from that child. Although the action of a child has no value, and the child has no liability, it's not value. When it comes to the Nedarim, it's based on a pasuk. It's called mufla samach leish. If the child is aware of what he's saying, between the age of 12 and 13, or 11 and 12 for a girl, that neder takes on value versus a person who's bound by the laws of the Nedarim. So that third party is not permitted to benefit, So if the child took an oath that this person cannot benefit, or said the object is off limits to that person, that third party cannot benefit from that. Well, let's say the child makes the neder when he's a child, and now he becomes an adult. Is the child now bound when he becomes the adult for what he said between the age of 12 and 13? That's called smufla samach liish. The neder has value for anybody who is a person of obligation.